I'm not going to win. That's what Tea Party pioneer Rand Paul told his wife when he decided to run for the vacant Kentucky Senate seat. Well, now he's got his hands full. An eye doctor whose only political experience was having renegade Congressman Ron Paul as a father, Rand is suddenly a senator in D.C., wrestling with next week's debt ceiling deadline and proposing his own $500 billion budget slashing. In his free time, he's written a new book called The Tea Party Goes to Washington. Welcome, Senator.
Glad to be with you.
So glad to have you back. I love your title. It reminds me of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, where this outsider idealist comes into town and then is gobsmacked by reality. Is that what happened to you?
Well, we'll see what happens. I mean, some have said when the Tea Party gets here, we'll co-opt them. And I've been laughingly saying, you know what, we're going to co-opt the rest of them. And interestingly, you know, one of the things we've talked about is earmarks. Now we have the President of the United States saying in his State of the Union, he will veto any earmarks. So I think we're already co-opting the place.
Well, the interesting thing about your proposed budget is that you did not attack entitlements. You didn't touch Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. Why?
We wanted to prove that there was a large amount of money that could be gotten without touching entitlements, because entitlements is more emotional to many people. But we also did, in the $500 billion, we did cut from the military budget. I believe exactly what Secretary Gates said, that not all defense spending is sacred, not all military or defense spending is necessary, and not all of it is without waste. So you have to look at the military budget, and it's ultimately what conservatives will have to do is conservatives have to embrace the fact that if you eliminate all non-military discretionary funding, you don't balance the budget. You have to look at military, and then ultimately we have to look at entitlements. And we are going to look at entitlements. We have a bill that will be reforming and fixing Social Security in perpetuity in the next few weeks.
In perpetuity. Okay, that's forever, right?
For a long time. And the way you do it is you basically link up age to longevity. When Social Security was passed in the 30s, we were living to be about 65 years old. We now live to 80. And we have all the baby boomers retiring, and I've said, you know what, they blamed me for a lot of things, but I'm not responsible for the baby boom. That was somebody else had something to do with that. But we have to fix it, and we have to acknowledge there is a problem.
What are we talking about? Are we talking about means testing, raising the retirement age?
Yes.
Give us specifics.
Yes. You do have to raise the age, and I think what you do is you do it gradually. In 1984, we did it by raising it a month or two every year. I've told people in my campaign, because I am a moderate, I have told people we're not going to touch Social Security for anybody unless they're under 55. So really it takes a while to raise the age, but you need to get started now, because if you wait until there's a calamity like there was in Greece or Spain or Portugal, they're raising the age dramatically. Overnight they raise the age, which is very difficult for people to plan. So we would raise the age gradually to 69 over, I think, 20 years, and then hook it to longevity, and it may end up going to 70 over another 10 years. Really, over about 30 years, it probably goes to 70, and then there would have to be some means testing, and people aren't going to like that. But the thing is the alternative is the system may collapse.
All right, why aren't people going to like that? Because let me just say right now, I would volunteer for this, okay? Right. If you want to raise the age of retirement, that's fine. If you want to test me and see if I can afford to pay my own bills and therefore don't need the money, I'm happy to do that. Why is that such a hard sell?
Well, I think people will accept it ultimately. I think young people have already discounted it. All the young people have already anticipated the age will go up and that it is insolvent and something will have to be done. That's why I don't think it's the third rail anymore, and that maybe the American voter is looking for someone who will stand up and say, this is how we fix it. This is how we fix it gradually, the least painful way, but we have to step up and fix it.
You're one of the few people who's been upfront about the need to cut defense spending. And you said earlier this week that you would not vote for a war that you were not willing to send your own sons to fight, or that you were not willing to fight yourself.
Right.
So given that, don't you think it's time we pulled out of Afghanistan?
Well, I think that is the stepwise test you have to take. And if you're not willing to go or don't think it's somewhere your kids should go, then you shouldn't be there. I think initially we should have gone to Afghanistan. I think after 9/11, we can't let people attack our country and let terrorist bases exist. So I think we were right to go there and disrupt things. I think you could still keep them from reforming with a much smaller presence. You could maybe have 5,000 or 10,000 troops, maybe special forces on a base, if anybody attempts to reform. But we have to decide, are we going to do nation building? And that's what we're doing there. We're spending billions building schools and bridges, and it's noble that we want to help people, but we're doing it with borrowed money, and we're letting our own infrastructure decline, and I think we have to really reconsider.
All right, next week is a big week. It's debt ceiling week. If we have just until a week from today, a week on Friday, the government shuts down unless you raise the debt ceiling or pass another continuing resolution to keep things functioning for a little while. I mean, are you really willing to see the government shut down?
No, I don't want the government to shut down.
I know you don't want to, but you're willing to let it.
Well, no, what I want to do is have an alternative. See, I don't think it should be either or. I don't think it should be either you pass the same thing we're doing now, continue spending as is, or it shuts down. What about an in-between solution? That is, we pass a budget or a continuing resolution that spends what comes in. And so we have approximation of a balanced budget almost immediately. It would be significant, but during that month where you do have the significant decline in spending, then maybe they'd get serious about having a 5-year plan. And I will vote for gradualism, but there has to be some gradualism. It has to go towards something. It has to balance the budget eventually. Yeah. And I won't vote for anything less. And without me, then the people who believe in that, the Tea Party people, have no one. If I'm not willing to stand up, no one is. And so I think I'm obligated to do that by the people who elected me.
One last question for you, the one everybody wants to know. Is your dad running for president?
You know, he won't tell me. I've asked him several times, and he says he might, and he says he might not. He hasn't decided, but he has an amazing amount of support. I'll tell you, every time I go through the airport, the baggage handlers, the person that takes me there, and the cab drivers, they love him. And most of them will tell me, well, I'm a Democrat, but I love your dad. He really does well with independents and Democrats, and Republicans too, but he has a cross appeal that very few of them actually have, and I think it's because he will honestly assess the problems and bring it out regardless of sort of party partisanship. You know?
Yeah, he comes across as someone who tells the truth and doesn't really care what the consequences are, let the chips fall.
Right.
But he also said the other day that, like you know, there is a risk that you might win.
That's true.
All right. Senator Rand Paul, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.